Hello, all you robots born to follow orders. I'm King Link, and this is my last look and review at ICEY. ICEY has always followed orders, and as such, ICEY subscribes to King Link Reviews because ICEY wants great game content. Yeah, that's a pitch, but it's also my take on ICEY's story writing. I'm going to start with the main game here, and probably one of the big problems. ICEY is both a good game and a bad game. If you follow my orders there exactly, you'll subscribe and get fantastic content, but if you follow the orders in ICEY, you'll find a very run-of-the-mill and dull brawler. It would actually rank pretty low in my book, probably under River City Ransom Remake, and that's rather bad. But ICEY as a game intends for you not to follow orders, at least to violate them. It wants the player to disobey the narrator and actually opens up to a rather interesting game if the player does so. There's a number of story pieces, unique experiences, one-off rooms, and wonderful moments in the game that are hidden because they're just off the beaten path. Nothing is actually hidden fully here, but the game wants you to walk by a warehouse, for instance, and shows you the B button allowing you to enter the warehouse, and the arrows tell ICEY and the player to go to the right. The narrator says, ICEY ignores the warehouse. Yes, it's obvious what the game doesn't want you to do, or even does want you to do, but it's up to you which path you take. The real issue though with ICEY is the gameplay isn't that great. Like I said before, as a brawler, it's weak and repetitive. There's issues with the story and the narrator, and I'll get to those, but the main story is completely lacking in content. Just go kill Judas. That's what you get when you follow the arrows, and while the game doesn't change much, it's the story and writing that gets so much better when you fully explore the game. Like I said, there's a lot of side paths, and almost every one of them was remarkably interesting. The only ones that lost my interest are rooms with just cash for the player to collect, but even there, the money is helpful. The narrator too makes references to ICEY going against him, and while he never forces the player back on the path, it's what makes ICEY stand out and is really interesting. If you're thinking Stanley Parable, you kind of nailed it. There's a touch of Pony Island and Portal here too, and the only real problem for me is that in each of those games, the main game is mostly polished, and it's the base game that it's trying to subvert is what makes Stanley Parable, Pony Island, and Portal great. Here, it doesn't work as well because the main game isn't as interesting, so it's subverting something you don't want to be playing. I've said that a few times, and I'm not trying to harp on the fact that the game isn't as good, but it's an important point to why this game doesn't work as a whole. Now, the graphics here are mostly good. However, I will say that ICEY looks a little bit flat, and the combat doesn't look great in still motion, and honestly, even in the video somewhat. That's more of a reviewer's problem, or a photographer's, but it's not amazing even for the platformer or side-scroller. And I'm sorry, I'm just being honest there. In addition, the combat does tend to get very repetitive. You fight the same enemies for most of the game, and the final levels tend to add more enemies for you to kill, but not new or interesting ones. There's even a part where the game drops two previous bosses into a room and acts like it's a new challenge for you. Fighting both at the same time would be interesting, but it's hardly a challenge at that point in the game, and those two bosses are kind of similar that you can fight them the same way. There's a decent difficulty with the combat here, and honestly, if you like brawlers, you'll have fun, but you can also mostly button mash through almost every encounter. There's a few tricks like hitting B to dispatch enemies, but it's not as required as I make it look. Let's dive into that story. It's quite lacking if you go through the main path. It's just a typical go kill the enemy, without a strong reason why, but it's those side paths that make the story worth playing. There's a deeper story here to the game than it first appears, but each side path seems to have its own piece, and it still needs to be pieced together. Some side paths are just silly. A call from the producer, for instance, who wants to show off a Korean girl band that he funds to make, and it makes me laugh because it's how long and odd that whole conversation goes. There's another one with a strange body, and it goes into a deeper story in a different layer of the game. Now, both of those are in the game, but only one of them is really part of the lore and canon, so not every one of the side paths are necessary. Now, there is one other problem I have with the game, and it's a big one. It's the narrator. I'm probably talking over him throughout this review, but check out the first look. You can get a better listen to him there. And the fact is, he's monotone. It's bad. I mean, I read my reviews off a computer and I try to emote. I might not be the best, but I'm not here to liven up a game. The thing is, the narrator in this game is very flat. I honestly think it's a programmer who read some placeholder audio to get the game into a working state, and it just doesn't work that well, and it's part of what makes the Stanley Parable and Portal just shine is that amazing voice acting. In this game, it's just not there. But all isn't lost. If you switch the voice acting to the Chinese Mandarin voice acting, oh my god, it's so fresh and great. I absolutely adore that narrator. I ask, why can't the English-American narrator have that much passion? And to me, that's what really hurts ICEY's experience. Ultimately, I can see what ICEY wants to be. It's trying to be the next Stanley Parable, and the thing is, it doesn't fail with weak humor or bad writing. Those are good, and that's what's frustrating, because I like when the game tries to subvert itself. The game itself is its own worst enemy though, because it's not a fun game to play straight. It's when you go away from that you have more fun. I spent 10 hours mucking with the game, and I got every achievement. It's not bad, but the core gameplay itself is what holds everything back. Well, that and the narrator. I ultimately have to give ICEY a 3 out of 5. You know, I recommend it, but not a strong recommendation. ICEY's good, and I'm hoping that the creator, I believe it's a Chinese developer, will eventually make another game, because there's a great stepping stone here. But that's the thing, it's a stepping stone, not a great game, and it's a shame because it's a really interesting effort here. You know, it's like a $20 bill wrapped around a brick. Yeah, you love that $20 bill, but that brick is still thrown through your window and it pisses you off. I don't know if that analogy really works, but that's how I kind of imagine this game. And that's ICEY. So, next up we're going to be talking about One Piece Pirate Warriors 3, I believe. It's Dynasty Warriors meets One Piece, and as a small side note, I do like Dynasty Warriors series, so I'm going to give that a fair review, but we'll be talking more about that next time. Until then, I'm King Link, and thank you for watching.